as per the Jungian principle of synchronicity, life gives us feedback. You take a step into something, and it doesn't mean that you don't encounter obstacles. Obstacles can be part of growth. But if there's a lack of any positive reinforcement signs, then you may say, this is not quite right.
I have no 4.
Pardon me?
I have no 4.
Is there 4 on here?
4 in the boxes?
No, step 4.
No, that means step 4.
Oh, okay. No, this is from, this
Oh.
is from my steps.
I'm sitting here trying to find it out.
This isn't in your steps.
None of us have it.
Oh, okay.
All right, it's just the next thing to do with all this. You've gone through the steps really in these sheets. The next thing to do, and you might want to make a note to yourself, you're going to test these hypotheses out in life. So it's a question of taking steps into these things one at a time and trying them. And again, if there are obstacles, that may be okay, but it should give you a positive reinforcement sense. Something of the wonder, something of the feeling of peace, of a feeling of purposefulness, of wholeness, of deeper insight, closeness to others through loving service. These things, you should get this kind of feedback from it. And when Robert tried to go around and organize everybody, not only were there obstacles, but there was little positive feedback. So he began to think maybe his talent lay more in the motivator, the humor, in the working. He discovered that he was a real type A businessman, and he ended up finding out that his sole purpose was to help young people, motivate them to fully mature. And he found his greatest satisfaction working with young people and, like young boys in teen groups and stuff. And what he thought was his talent had been harnessed to something else, but his real sole purpose seemed to be a little bit different. And that's how you're going to tell in your life, is to take these out and test them and try them. And you look for 5 signs to see if something is working. You know universal signs? Anyone know what a sign is? A synchronistic happening. How would you describe synchronicity, Larry?
Well, a sign from the universe is any meaningful coincidence.
What occurred in synchronicity?
Pardon? Oh, yeah. I was looking for some kind of a statement that would express transpersonal will. And I thought, I need to find the prayer of St. Francis.
At the same time that Larry was thinking it, I was drawn in a thrift shop going to meet him for some flyers, and I had to buy the prayer of St. Francis to bring here today. So there's a sign there. There's some feedback from the universe that there's something related to him in that prayer. It fits. Something happens. It flows. There can be obstacles, though. Obstacles can be part of growth, but there's a positive reinforcement. It could be a feeling.
One person describes it in the book, I ain't much, baby, but I'm all I've got. In that book, his sign was a negative sign. He was unhappy in his job. He was a successful salesperson. He owned a beautiful home, a new sports car, but he had little time for his relationships, and they weren't quality time with his wife and children. And something didn't fit, and he had a heart attack. When he had a heart attack, that was the universe message that he was not fulfilling his soul's purpose. He used that heart attack to experiment with his life. And he went out and sold his fancy house, sold his sports car, started living, wrote a book that he wanted to write, and went into teaching, which is what he really wanted to do. And teaching is a form of selling, but it was selling an idea and ideas that felt comfortable for him. And that would be looking at a sign from the universe. I think you have to be in touch with signs, both negative and positive, in directing yourself to your real core purpose, and to be involved with careers that you really care about, so that you can feel passion again and vitality toward not just a relationship, but towards what you're really involved with in life.
So you look for these signs, these positive and negative things that tell you this isn't right, this is right. Even through the obstacles, there's something reinforcing that sense of joy, wonder, and synchronicity. And you look for 5 signs to see if it's working. And the last thing you'll do, and this will have to be done after you've tried the hypotheses, is to finally create a mission statement. It's not a real statement of your mission. For example, Robert's statement of his mission was to help and motivate the undeveloped to mature. He learned this by testing out his hypotheses and so forth. And Amanda's statement of her mission was to celebrate the workings of God through nature. You come up with a real statement of your mission. So those are the 2 steps that you can carry with you into your life and get involved in that wonderful, joyous, synchronistic process of experimenting toward finding the thing that resonates for you.
Did you
Yeah.
say there were 5 signs?
5, it's loose, but look for some signs that something is working. In other words,
Oh, I thought you were going to list 5
no,
signs to know.
no,
that's
yeah, we got a
working.
lot of numbers here. No, just look for some signs, maybe 5, that something
I see.
is working or isn't. But obstacles don't mean, obstacles can be part of the growth. But the lack of any positive reinforcement signs may tell you that this hypothesis is not really in keeping with your soul's purpose.
Would a sign, a good sign of something good happening to you, would that be a
Yeah.
sign?
Yeah.
Something really very
Yeah.
good that would say, yes, go ahead and do this.
Yeah, or a
thing.
wonderful feeling of fulfillment and peace. Maybe
Yeah.
you went to work with those special kids and it was hard. Cheryl, my friend Cheryl, is coming over to visit my daughter who has autism, and it isn't always easy. Sometimes Vanessa gets up and walks out, but there are other times she'll sing with Cheryl or something. So even though there are obstacles, there's a feeling of rightness to it for Cheryl, and that's how she can tell. You know, it's not an overt thing necessarily, but it's kind of an inner thing. They sing together or whatever.
Nietzsche said that if we had a why to, we could endure almost any how to. And I think coming to grips with this core is the why to. And once you really feel that resonating, the how to is not really an issue. But if we've lost our why to, it's hard to have a how to. And that's perhaps a statement about all the suicides we're hearing in the papers, even among young people at a formative stage of their life, is they're not experiencing the why to.
From within. You're fulfilling everybody's outside expectations.
And so they're saying farewell. This world doesn't fit for them.
Did you read about those 4 young high school students that committed
That's
suicide
what I was
together?
referring to.
Yeah.
So
It seems to
coming
be a
to
pattern.
Yes.
for a why to is really important. Why am I here? What's it all about for me?
Carl Miniger said happiness is finding a mission in life and taking it seriously. Leo Buscaglia, and do any of you listen to Leo Buscaglia? He says that people too often are saying, my purpose is to get as much as I can out of life. You know how he talks. But he suggests that a major way we can achieve a higher quality of life and have more good feelings about ourselves is by doing something for others. And this sort of leads into just one last subject I'd like to touch upon, and that's service. The whole idea of service in general. That happiness, that real inner peace and happiness may be found in being somewhat other-directed, in bringing that to others. A wise person once said that the only immortal thing about us is the love that we've left on this plane. If you want to be healthy, help. A Chinese proverb, if you want to be happy, help others. They found that people live longer when they have something to nurture. People in convalescent hospitals who have one little plant of flowers to water will have a reason to get up in the morning. So there's a lot to be said. We can think about, this has been a me time, you know, the 70s and 80s. What do I want? What's my purpose? But in the final analysis, the real fruit of happiness is in finding that unique way that we can offer a gift of love to life. And it doesn't have to be on some grand scale. You know, it can be, after Leo Buscaglia gave one of his talks, these much older ladies wrote to him saying that they were just burning with a desire to help. So they were driving away from the lecture and they saw a man changing his tire, and they rushed up to say, can we help you change your tire? He said, no, I think I can handle it. So they sang a religious song, and he said they were experimenting with a hypothesis. It was this week's People magazine, if any of you read it, on the article In Need of an Angel. It gave the example of 3 people right now. One is a person in San Francisco who I thought really exemplified this being of service to life in creative ways. One is Harriet Weltzner. She knew many elderly shut-in people who felt useless and as if they weren't contributing to life, and many of them liked to knit. So she had them knit massive amounts of scarves, and some of them were crooked, and she donated them to the needy children in Cleveland who were cold in the wintertime and had nothing special. So, you know, life is asking us to do so many things, so much, there's so many problems out there, we turn it off. I mean, it really isn't hard to think of how we could do something. And there's an association in Georgia called Georgia Advocacy, which matches people in a community who'd like to give love to people shut away in institutions, autistic, retarded people, and so forth. And one young bachelor, David Jones, found a young boy about 11 who was thought to be severely retarded, Kim Patrick, who was just huddled in a ball in an institution. He decided to adopt him as his son, and he says it's unbelievable the amount of intelligence that he really possesses in his feeling nature. So this Georgia Advocacy matches people who would like to find ways to advocate. And some people don't have time to adopt a person, but may become an advocate for just maybe an hour a month, so that that person with no parents, shut in an institution, has someone to speak out on behalf of him or herself when it's time for decisions to be made in the life. And finally, there's a young woman right now at San Francisco General Hospital. She calls herself Rita Rocket. She's pregnant, and she came to San Francisco at a time of great turmoil. She'd lost a child, she'd had a terrible divorce, she'd kind of lived on the wild side herself. And the only people who befriended her was a special man who happened to have a gay lifestyle and his two friends. When that man died of AIDS, she felt called to go into San Francisco General Hospital and visit the AIDS wards. And she comes pregnant in that ward, and she brings her unique talent of life and joy to those people. And it was really touching to read about it. One man who was near to death was so moved when he touched her belly and could feel that baby stirring. So there are things you can do right here. Not everyone is to do that. There are lots of different paths. I wanted to share a couple of Edgar Casey quotes in conclusion on service. He said, this is on the kind of service that we're all capable of. He said, "Try in thine own experience each, that you speak not for one whole day unkindly of any, that you say not a harsh word to any, about any, and see what such a day would bring to you." And this one, "Let no day then pass that ye do not speak a cheery and an encouraging word to someone, and you will find thine own heart uplifted, thine own life opened, thy love appreciated, thy purposes understood." Because it is a law that what we put forth returns to us also. Another one, "Thus the purpose of each experience is that the entity may magnify and glorify that which is good, for good is of the one source, God, and is eternal. Then, as an individual entity magnifies that which is good and minimizes that which is false, it grows in grace, in knowledge, in understanding." And finally, "Peace must begin within self, before there may be the activity or the application of self in such a manner as to bring peace in thy own household, in thine own heart, in thine own vicinity, in thine own state or nation." So service is something that's available to us all, and it really is a source from which peace and happiness can spring. Remembering that the only thing immortal about us will be the love that we've left.
That kind of service that Lynn is talking about is really the transpersonal will. It is really coming to the fourth stage of development where we really experience a oneness with the universe within each and every person. And I think Francis of Assisi, when he came to that point after going through a lot of the negative will and the adult will and the empowering will, came up with this very, very touching prayer. And you've probably heard it many times, but it's Lord, and that's the transpersonal, make me an instrument of thy peace. And where there is hatred, let me so love. And where there is doubt, where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. I think that is an example of transpersonal will, and that is an example of really resonating, in which we're putting the ultimate priority as the first priority, and then the rest the how-to flows natural. And you want to add to that?
No. I think this is a time for us to take a moment to break and to rest, and hope that you'll carry this out with you in service, new hypotheses in service of a higher ideal that you can really use in your life, because life needs you.
Here's theater play going on now in Theater Works in Palo Alto called Sunday in the Park with George. It's about the life of George Seurat, who died very early at 31. But it's really a touching tribute to the artist in all of us. Life is like a canvas in which we're painting some very profound things. And then when the painting is done, we're moving on to our next canvas. And we're all an artist of life, so to speak. And it's not easy to risk to take the step to create a new canvas. It's much easier to stay and look at something that we've accomplished. And there is no certainty. In a way, we are innovating, creating out of nothing, or creating from within. And often, at times, we meet critics who think that our work is without merit, in fact, mediocre. So we're all facing that same artistic dilemma. But that is life's challenge, is to move on, to find harmony, to work with design, composition, and ultimately to collaborate and structure our time and our meaning in life in a way that really is fulfilling, not only for ourselves, but for the universe. So we're going to take a moment's break as we get in touch with our own core individuality and come back and look at characteristics of self-actualizing people, peak performers, and the creative individual. And then we're going to follow it up with our guided imagery.
2 guided imageries and some individual attunement sessions.
And then some one-on-one sharing. And then we'll take a moment.
About 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah.
They're able to experiment with rules and to think beyond rules. That the creative individual is able to see things that a lot of us overlook. They're able to accentuate things that many times we take and just overlook. If you think of Picasso with his Guernica, his immortal statement about war, that's something that makes war a little less romantic if you've ever seen his creation following the Spanish Civil War. Most creative people have a tremendous desire to tell what they see, even at great personal pain and expense. Typically, they have a hard time managing themselves, creative individuals. And maybe this is that strong intuitive dimension where they're not as good at being sensate. And therefore, they're perhaps a little bit seen as misfits or idiosyncratic or eccentric. Again, Einstein comes to my mind, who didn't have an easy time managing his own ego. Creative individuals often also are very passionate and tempestuous, and their interpersonal relationships are not always without drama. In a sense, they're dramatic. They feel things in hues and colors that resonate through them at a very atypical level. They see things on Rorschach ink blot tests that other people don't. They may not appear to be mentally well adjusted. In fact, they are crazier and saner than the average person. They have a preference for the asymmetrical. They like chaos. In fact, they court chaos. It is kind of like the wellspring of their creativity. So dreams, even nightmares, are something that they openly allow into their life. They don't have to have a sense of a predetermined outcome. They're open to possibilities. They're willing to risk. They're willing to go with the flow. And that is perhaps why they can bring the new, the innovative, the original into our lives as well as that which comes into their lives. And so these are things that perhaps we can to some degree incorporate. None of us wants to walk out of this as a creative Irwin Corey, but we may want to bring more and court more creativity as a wellspring within our own lives and into our careers and into our interpersonal relations. Clearly, it's okay to have a passion. Clearly, it's okay to stand for conviction. Clearly, it's okay to take a risk and go beyond the ordinary. And that's some of the steps in the creative orientation. That rules are meant to be experimented with. They are not prescriptions of the oughts and shoulds that lock us in to a fixed outcome. And that's something I wanted to impart with you as part of this search for resonating with a higher purpose. The creative individual, and creativity has been linked with longevity. That creative individuals tend to live longer, and you can see this in the creative artists. Think of Pablo Casals at 92, working with the violin, I believe, was his instrument.
Cello.
The cello.
Yeah.
Think of Pablo Casals. Think of Charlie Chaplin creating children at 85. Think of Michelangelo in his late 50s and 60s being commissioned to head a major architectural effort. Think of Freud, who at 39 just began really his career in the field of psychoanalysis and going beyond neurology. Think of Grandma Moses.
Good, I'm glad you're not sick.
And Susan B. Anthony at 58, I think, was incarcerated on her 11th time for her commitment to the women's suffrage movement. So each and every one of us can spark to a
Georgia
new...
Mother Teresa.
Spark to a new career at any point in our life. Once we unfreeze ourselves from the reactive mind, from that earlier programming, and from the fears, the big four-letter word that's holding us back from really experimenting and trying out the possibilities, and the joy, and the elan vital, and the joie de vivre that come with that kind of resonating and peak experience. So with that in mind, we're going to share a little bit more about...
Oh, I think since we're moving into our meditations, your time management sheet is self-explanatory. Hopefully that will be a tool to you. And if you didn't get one, Joe would have them as you go out. That just looked like useful in terms of time structuring, and I hope in becoming more sensate that could be helpful. I was going to touch upon health and concepts of health and nutrition. I might just suggest at this point that creative individuals, there is a physical component to it too. It's not only that creative life force flowing through us, but it's care of the physical body and its well-being, and that nutrition and holistic modalities for maintaining the bodily energy are important too. There is a book I'd recommend to you that includes this dietary guideline. It's called the Edgar Cayce, it's a long title if you're interested, and the best book I know of on all-around health, including diet, osteopathic adjustment, self-healing. It's called the Edgar Cayce Handbook for Health Through Drugless Therapy, and it is really an excellent book. It talks about the importance of keeping balance not only in our personality structure but within the body physical, and that our bodies tend to have an acid or alkaline balance, a pH balance, and that too often in our American diet we are very acid and not mindful of the combinations of food energies that we put into the body. It's important for long life and vital energy to carry out your soul's purpose that you eat as many things that come as close to being vitally alive and in a natural state as you can, such as the greens of a salad or nuts and what have you. The Edgar Cayce Clinic that I've visited in the last year suggests that actually 80% of our diet should really be fruits, vegetables, and water and fluids, so that every 8 servings of food, some of those should be a glass of water, a fresh salad, fruit. They talk about combinations of foods being really important, and there are many guidelines contained within that book that I think could be helpful to you in creating a vital base for the body.
Could you run a part about
Okay, it's the Edgar Cayce Handbook for Health Through Drugless Therapy. And the author of it is Harold Riley, R-E-I-L-L-Y, who was the head of the American Physiotherapists in the United States for many, many years. He is also almost a centenarian, and he talks about in the book portraits of physical tips so that you may live a longer lifespan from the holistic modality. Edgar Cayce in his reading suggested that if we thought right and ate right and cared for the body properly, that our natural lifespan in the 20th century should be 125 to 150 years is the real potential of the body right now. That long, long ago in the Atlantean lands, it's thought that when consciousness was originally more in co-creatorship with that source, that the biblical stories of people living 900 years may in fact have been true. Lifespan decreased as we sort of fell and descended into some of the limitations of the earth consciousness, and that we're in a cycle now where we're moving into a sense of greater longevity. I mean, certainly all of us in this room can think about that what we thought 30 was 10 years ago, or 70 was, or 50 was, we don't think that way anymore. It's like, that's 20 years younger than it was when we thought about it 10 years ago. We have someone running the country, whether or not everyone agrees with the politics, certainly an example of somebody who is taking leadership at an older age, and more society is sort of growing up in its attitudes toward age. And that's helpful for women especially, suffered from some of those false pictures, those personality false pictures. We're moving into individuality. I was pleased to note that TV Guide voted Joan Collins at 53 the sexiest woman in the media. So society as a whole is growing up, and we're beginning to see a sense of agelessness, maybe as we realize that we are in and out of Earth lifetimes with a fluidity. So we're not locked in so much to those fearful concepts. And it is never too late to be who you're intended to be, to discover the mission, vocation, and service that is yours. So on that note, perhaps we'll go within and take a flight of fancy into the meditative levels with some guided
Can I make
imagery.
a comment?
Yeah.
If all of you were to, in your meditations, visualize the color of pink filtering through your entire energy for 5 to 10 minutes a day, it retards aging. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Okay.
So we're going to do some brief guided imagery that have to do with this whole purpose of mission and fulfilling a higher purpose, realizing inner potentials, and also transforming negative functions into something positive. So, are we going to put any music on in the background?
You want to turn the light off, Larry? I'm going to set this up there for you.
So I'd like you to close your eyes and try to get in touch with the imagery as I present this, and there'll be some background music. So I'd like you to close your eyes and get in a completely relaxed position. And I would like you to picture yourself at a dock on some bay, and you're preparing for a voyage. And you're going to be joining others on a new voyage, a voyage in which you're not certain as to the outcome. And as you can feel yourself and visualize yourself stepping onto this boat, this sailboat of sorts, visualize what you're taking along on your voyage. What do you absolutely need to make this trip? To make the trip in this voyage of your life. And as you gather the essentials that you're taking along, get in touch with the challenge involved in your voyage, and the why, the purpose, as you begin this voyage. And now you're underway, and all around you, you're aware of this big, uncharted sea. And you're aware of the obstacles and the skills that are required to maneuver the boat, and the planning that's required to safely chart to the next port. And then as you begin to carry out these tasks, the tasks that are essential to your voyage, you become aware of the relationships with others on this voyage. In fact, a deep awareness of how interdependent we all are. how much we can learn, how much we can lean, how much we can share, and how much guidance we really need to carry out a given task. And soon you're aware that you're arriving at a port that has been familiar to you. You've been there before. You have that feeling of deja vu. And as you arrive at the port, you realize it's a time in your life, when you're accomplishing a major step forward. Perhaps it's a time of your life when you really took on your first major job. You can remember that time in your life. You can remember the sweaty palms, the feelings of, can I really accomplish this task, this job? It is a time in your life when you're beginning to crystallize a feeling of a calling, a vocation. A time in your life when you really feel a sense of promise and responsibility. As in the famous poem, a sense of promises to keep and miles to go before one rests or sleeps. And now that you've spent some time at this port in your life, say goodbye to this era in your life. And be aware that it's time in your voyage. It's time to move on. In a way, you feel the sentiment and nostalgia of saying goodbye, of letting go. Also a time of challenge, of moving on to new skills and new directions, new learning. And so as you move in this voyage, be aware of the next port that you land, the next step, the next door. And what is the calling that brings you here to this port? What is the lesson and task that is part of your learning here on this plane? And be aware of the changes, the transitions, the stepping stones that you've undertaken to get to this next port, this next place, this next chapter on your voyage. And the pilgrims with whom you've shared this experience with, the mentors who trained you, and also get in touch with the conflicts and discordant notes that didn't quite work out well. Always remembering it was a time in your life when you were ready and knew it was time to take an important step. And now finally, be aware that you're getting ready to take another voyage. This is the voyage into your own future, into the world that has yet been determined. And what are some of the things that you're packing to take this time? Now the boat launches off, and you look into a limitless horizon. And you're in touch one more time that this life is indeed a series of voyages, a calling, a movement toward something higher, something greater, and something that's seeking completion. And as your boat moves out, feel the sense of challenge, if you can. The moments of disappointment in the past. And also the essentiality of having a project, of having a history, and having a series of dreams and promises that you're sharing with others that require completion before you reach your final destination. To move on to your next step and direction. And now you can visualize what that future possibility is for you. You can actually picture yourself and how you're manifesting your energy. What your task is and what your mission is becoming.